Hello, my fellow YouTubers and subscribers, and welcome to what is quite possibly my last new release review of this year, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, or the Netflix Pinocchio, whichever way you want to describe it. So, Guillermo del Toro brings us his version of Pinocchio. He really is quite the filmmaker, isn't he? He's made some really weird and obscure films, and I'm still very curious to this day as to how his version of The Hobbit would have ended up had he still been listed to direct it. So, this movie is a stop-motion animation version of Pinocchio. It is the same story with added layers, but I shan't go too much into that just yet. We did have the Disney live-action remake earlier this year, which, well, to be honest, is god-awful, so there's not much point talking about it, and that was directed by Robert Zemeckis. But this version is directed by Guillermo del Toro. We've seen many versions of Pinocchio, so you know the story, but for context, let's just go over the plot anyway. A father's wish magically brings a wooden toy to life, giving him the chance to care for a child. So, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, I didn't know what to expect from this movie. It wasn't really marketed because it went on to Netflix, so I'm quite surprised because I would have liked to have seen this movie in the cinema. To be perfectly honest, I was blown away by this film. I thought it was really good. This was a really fantastic film. I shit you not. This is one of the best versions of Pinocchio you'll ever see. It isn't perfect. There may be some aspects which are quite weird and are quite out there. It is the strangest version of Pinocchio you'll ever see. But that's because of Guillermo del Toro. That's just his style. But I like the fact that this story is more emotionally engaging. It's not watered down, it's not made for children, it's made for anyone, really. Anybody could watch this. It's not so dark that it's unwatchable, it's not so dark that it's harrowing, but there's certainly a lot more emotional depth in this film, and I think that's to the movie's success, the fact that they were able to pull off a slightly more mature version of the story with this much emotional impact. I am really quite blown away by the script of this film, the writing, and how much emotion they got from Geppetto and Pinocchio's father-son dynamic. Because this movie is 2 hours long, they do have the time to delve into some other aspects of the story. We get to see a lot more of Geppetto in this film. We get to see his journey of grief, how he loses his other son, his real son, Carlos. And we get to see how that's what fuels him to create Pinocchio, and then he struggles to accept Pinocchio when Pinocchio comes to life, and then he has to learn to grow and love him, all of that kind of stuff. So Geppetto was fantastically well done in this. And I think David Bradley should be commended because he played Geppetto. He was really, really, really good. Other parts to the film which potentially are a little bit meandering, that could be my only detriment, is that the film is perhaps a tad bit overlong. It does seem to indulge quite a lot in some of the additional story elements. Not so much with Geppetto, but more with Pinocchio himself. Like when he goes to the training camp with his human friend and his father, who is like a Nazi. There's a political war plot going on. You'll even see in this film the Nazis do their Heils, which is quite interesting for a story about Pinocchio. The fact that they chose to include the political war side of things, and how young boys were being indoctrinated into the war, and how Pinocchio himself, as a wooden boy, nearly got involved in this, because there's this other added plot element, which is about he has multiple lives. He's like a cat, he has like 9 lives, and then whenever he dies, quote unquote, he goes to this state of purgatory, and then he's greeted by the sister of the fairy witch, or whoever, and she has a timer, and she says, an hourglass, and she's like, look, you've only got so many lives, you can't keep wasting them, you got to use them properly. So like I said, there's very weird elements to this film, and some people may not dig that, some people might find it a little bit out there and a bit obscure, but I actually applaud Guillermo del Toro because it adds a lot of emotional impact to the story, because all of that was added in for the purpose of getting Pinocchio to make that decision to save his father and go back and sacrifice himself for his dad. That's why the Disney version, the Disney remake, sucked. Because it took away the opportunity for Pinocchio to make his own decisions. He was, in that film, he was strung along and events just happened. He wasn't allowed to do anything of his own accord. He couldn't make a decision. So we couldn't emotionally engage with the character. In this film, you totally engage with Pinocchio as a character. He feels real, and he doesn't have to become a real boy at the end for it to feel like that. I was waiting for the moment when he would turn real, but then we see he just comes back to life, and Geppetto says, "I love you exactly the way you are," which is an ending that some might see as controversial, but I think it still works because you feel enough of the emotional relationship. You feel like there's enough emotion from this boy for him to feel real. You know, he doesn't have to look real. He just feels real, and I think that's important. And I think the ending is honestly incredibly moving when he is brought back, and Geppetto is once again crying for a son, and you really just want Geppetto to have some happiness. The guy is so depressed, and even seeing Geppetto's depression was kind of blue. Like, whoa, God, he went to alcohol and he started chopping trees down. He really was a mess, and I like the fact that the film played on that. It had this commentary about grief and depression and all of that. But also I like the fact that Geppetto wasn't totally victimized. They did give him flaws. The fact that he needed to be brought down, and Jiminy Cricket had to say to him, "Look, you're so obsessed with your own grief. You need to care about what other people think. Stop being so selfish and stop wallowing in self-pity." So I like that. I like that very much. And much like the other films and the other versions of the story, Jiminy Cricket is definitely the voice of reason in this instance. Also, speaking of the cricket, Ewan McGregor voices him, and he narrates the story as well. He's really good in this film. They call him Sebastian for some reason. He's called Sebastian J. Cricket or something. Basically, he's Jiminy Cricket, let's be honest. But the design of him is really cool. Like, he looks... It's a plain design, but it's actually quite nice because the voice gives it a lot of character. And I think Ewan McGregor's got a very animated voice, and he's voiced animated characters before in Beauty and the Beast with Disney. So, yeah, I think he was a good choice for the role. The cast are fantastic. Gregory Mann voices Pinocchio. He is great. At first, he's probably a bit over the top because he is a child and he is playing a child who is not very knowledgeable about anything, who's just excited to be alive. And at times you feel like, God, this kid could get on my nerves a bit. But after a while, he does learn to grow and he has to make some tough decisions. And there are some emotional moments in this film. So I think that really counts for something. So I'm glad that I'm glad that he voiced him. He was a good choice. Other people like Cate Blanchett, who plays the monkey Spazzatura. She's good, and John Turturro as the Toro. He's a good cast member. Ron Perlman is in the film as well. Finn Wolfhard plays Candlewick, who is the young boy whose father is trying to enlist into the war. So they have that nice friendship. We've also got Christoph Waltz. He's the standout in this film. Christoph Waltz plays Count Volp, who is the one that inducts, who coerces Pinocchio into the entertainment industry. And there's a lot more time spent with that character. Maybe there's a bit too much time with that character. Perhaps some of his scenes could have been cut because it did feel like they spent a bit too long in the carnival. But to be fair, though, the design of the character and the animation is fucking beautiful. It's fucking stunning. But Christoph Waltz's performance is fantastic. And you really start to hate this character a lot more than you did in other versions. I do appreciate this version giving some of those characters a lot more time to finesse. Like, I feel like Geppetto is a much more well-rounded character. Even Pinocchio himself is a much more well-rounded character. And it's pretty interesting the directions that this film goes in. Tilda Swinton voices the wood sprite, whose twin sister is like the dark wood sprite, who is the one that's there when Pinocchio is in purgatory, and she's like, saying about his lives, and she's like, there are rules, but if you break the rules, then you suffer the consequences and all that. Also, the black rabbits are kind of cool, like showing the gambling and the poker is kind of interesting as well. So there are definitely strong elements from other versions and very relevant things, like things in the real world that are supposed to educate Pinocchio about what's good and what's bad. And there's a lot of morals in Pinocchio, and I like the story in that regard, is that it's a story about morals. And in this case, it's about not just that, it's about the real world. It's about people grieving. It's about fathers and sons. It's about entertainment. It's about life. It's this version is the most slice of life that Pinocchio has ever been, and I applaud Guillermo for that. And it's got so much heart, so much emotional depth, that's you know, you're going to be moved to tears. It's beautifully crafted. It is so beautifully made, and the animation is mind-blowing. It is so good. This film reminds us that stop motion animation is a force to be reckoned with, and it is here to stay, and it's a lost art. We really need more films like this. You know, why can't we have more stop motion films? After this, I want Guillermo del Toro to do nothing but stop motion because he's so good at it. You know, this whole experience was just great. The film totally immersed me. It transported me, and I was with it. I could actually see this film being in 3D. You know, it's that interesting. I also want to shout out Alexandre Desplat's music score, because the music is beautiful as well. It's fantastic. The songs didn't really hold too much of an impact for me, but they were lovely. They were charming, and they fit the overall tone of the movie. But obviously not quite as memorable as the Disney ones, the original Disney film. But that's fine. You know, I think the songs service the movie very well, but you know, they're not the most standout. That's all I'm saying. So overall, I think this film is fantastic. It's an animated masterpiece. It's really good. The only thing working against it is perhaps a bit of pacing. It could have been shaved down to maybe 1 hour 45. I think that would have probably been enough. I think the training camp scene does go on a bit too long, and the stuff with the Nazis is potentially a bit overdone. We don't need so much. That's not the main focus of the story. We didn't need that so much. And all of that stuff was a little bit filler. But I did like the sort of payoff with, what's his name? Candlewick, I think is his name, and his father. That sort of dynamic was really well paid off as well. And it was kind of, you know, not mirroring Pinocchio, but kind of a parallel in some aspects. So, with that in mind, my final rating for the new Pinocchio film is a definite 10 out of 10. Yeah, I'm blown away. I am really quite surprised how much I enjoyed this. So anyway, thank you very much all for watching this review, and stay tuned next time when I do my top 5 best and worst movies of 2022. There will be 2 separate videos, and then I will also do my top 5 most anticipated movies of 2023. So stay tuned for that. I'll try and do a couple of things like another Q&A before the year is out. I'll try my best. It depends on my schedule really. Should have a bit more time off next week before I go back to uni. So anyway, thank you very much all for watching this review. Please hit the like and subscribe button for more content down below. Stay tuned next time for my top 10 best movies of 2022. So until next time, I'm Pajak's Perspective. See ya. Bye for now.